I was driving too fast that afternoon, and it wasn't because I was late. It was anger. I had an arranged engagement waiting for me up north, and a council calling every night for a date. That was when I hit the puddle. I heard the mud hit the glass. I heard the rock coming right after it, and the rear window of my pickup shattered with a dry snap. I got out ready to tear apart whoever had the nerve. My name is Rhett Wilder. 3 generations of land, of cattle, of name. In this whole county, people lower their voices when I walk into a room, and not one of them suspects that I'm the alpha of a pack that breathes right in the middle of town. Then the wind turned. Sun on grass, wild honey, and the wolf inside me, the one that had been asleep for years, stood straight up and said one word. Mate. No, not her. A woman covered in mud from head to foot, with another rock in her hand, ready to throw it at me. She cussed me out. I cussed right back. We went at it in the middle of the road like 2 old enemies. Who the hell is this woman? Who does she think she is? Oh, right. I'm the one who threw the mud on her. And that was when I noticed, under all that mud, she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. The engineer, my ranch foreman's daughter. Nobody has ever told me no in my whole life. She told me no 3 times in 2 minutes. And she didn't lower her head 1 inch. Hard-headed woman. Shit. I'm in trouble. Because I couldn't want that woman, and my wolf was never going to want another one.
The black pickup came faster than a dirt road should allow. Hazel Dunn didn't even have time to get out of the way. A second earlier, she'd been walking along the shoulder with her heavy backpack on one shoulder, her white t-shirt still clean, her jeans faded from a whole day of traveling, her hair loose the way she never wore it in the city, wild and brown and tangled by the wind. 26 years old, the first in her family to hang a diploma on a wall. And even so, all it took was the smell of that dirt to turn her back into the girl who ran barefoot across the yard. Coldwater opened up ahead of her, the blue mountains behind it, the Harvest Moon Festival banners already strung across the street from pole to pole. 2 weeks off. 2 weeks to breathe. That was when the pickup hit the puddle. A wave of mud came up off the road and broke over her. The white t-shirt. The jeans, her face, her hair, all of it, in one brown blow. Hazel stood there, dripping. She didn't scream. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathed in through her nose, and felt the anger settle cold in the place where other people feel fear. A few yards ahead, the tires squealed against the dirt. The pickup braked, too late. Sitting there with its back to her, the rear window shining in the late afternoon light, the truck looked like it was mocking her. Her hand found a rock on the shoulder, about the size of a fist. She weighed it in her palm, calm, almost thoughtful. Then she threw it with everything she had. Crash. The rear window shattered with a dry snap, the web of cracks opening from the center out. The whole road went quiet, only the engine idling. The door flew open. The man who climbed out was tall, shoulders that filled his shirt, jaw locked. Dark hair, a little out of place. And the eyes, a green, far too pale, that flashed when they landed on her. Do you have any idea what that glass costs? His voice came out low and hard, the voice of a man used to ending conversations. I do. Hazel wiped the mud off her face with the back of her hand, taking her time. Less than the dry cleaning you owe me. Consider us even." He blinked. It was quick, but she caught it. The fraction of a second in which the man expected her to lower her head, and the head didn't lower. "You were in the middle of the road." "I was on the shoulder." She took a step forward, her eyes steady on him. "You're the one who came in too fast to notice the difference. Let me guess. Nobody's ever told you no in your life, so you drive like the road clears itself for you. Even a puddle obeys, right?" His jaw locked. The hit landed. "I know every foot of this road," he said. "It's mine." How impressive. Her smile had nothing funny in it. Owner of the road, owner of the puddle. "And you still didn't notice a person walking on your own land. Maybe the problem isn't what's yours. Maybe it's what you stopped looking at." He closed the distance another step, and most people would have backed up. She didn't back up. She lifted her chin and let him come, because she had plenty of pride too, and hers didn't come from a pickup truck. "You've got a lot of mouth for somebody covered in mud," he said. "And you've got a lot of certainty for somebody who just made a mistake." She tilted her head. "That's what bothers you more, isn't it? Not the glass. Getting a no out of somebody you figured would shrink." And that was when he stopped. The scent reached him from under the mud and the wet dirt. Warm, alive, something like sun on grass and wild honey. And it went down deep, into a place he had kept locked for a long time. The answer died in his throat. His chest rose and fell once, too fast. For an instant, the green of his eyes went dark, almost gold, before it came back. Hazel saw it. She didn't understand it. She only saw the big, sure-of-himself man lose the thread in the middle of his own sentence, his eyes fixed on her in a way that raised the skin on the back of her neck under the mud. She didn't give him the satisfaction of backing away from that either. "Lose your train of thought?" she asked, her voice lower now, almost curious. "You were doing so well." He gave half a step back. He put his face back together out of pure control, and when he spoke again, the voice came out contained, and worse for it. "You're not from here. I was born 5 miles from this spot." She picked her backpack up off the ground and slung it over her shoulder, mud running down the straps. "You're the one who blew by too fast to know who lives on the land you swear is yours. Next time, break. It's cheaper than the glass." For a second, he didn't say anything. He only looked at her, and something in that look didn't match the fight, something that confused them both. "Next time," he said at last, turning his back. "Stay out of the way." "Next time," she shot back, without raising her voice. "Give me a reason." He didn't answer. He got into the pickup with the shattered window and tore off. The dust came up, swallowed the truck, and carried it toward the mountains. Hazel stayed in the road, her heart pounding, her chin still up out of pure stubbornness. Only when the truck was gone did she let her shoulders drop an inch. "Welcome home," she muttered, and kept walking, dripping mud with every step. Neither one of them had asked the other's name. Rhett Wilder drove the first few miles without seeing the road. His hand closed too hard around the wheel. The wind coming in cold through the broken window, throwing little shards onto the back seat. He didn't care about the truck. He cared about something else, the thing that had come up through his chest the moment he got close enough to that woman. The thing that was still beating now, insistent, growling under his skin. Mate. The word came on its own, from deep down, from the place where his wolf lived. Rhett tightened his jaw and sent it away. No, not her. Some woman, covered in mud, throwing rocks at cars. No. Except it wasn't only the scent. It was the rest. He was used to walking into a room and watching people adjust their posture, lower their voices, make space. He didn't think about it anymore, the same way he didn't think about breathing. And that woman had stood there in the middle of the road, covered in mud, and looked him in the face like she didn't owe anybody anything, and she'd found the exact spot to push. It had been years since anyone talked to him that way. Maybe never. It had been years, too, since his wolf had stood up like that for anyone. An instinct had gone, and picked that one. He let the air out slowly. He had an engagement waiting for him up north, arranged months ago, sealed by the council, a blood alliance he hadn't asked for and couldn't undo without splitting half a continent. An alpha doesn't choose by what the wolf wants. He chooses by what the pack needs. He had repeated that to himself his whole life, and it had always been enough. Until a woman covered in mud shattered his window and woke up, with a rock and one sharp sentence, the wolf he had spent years keeping quiet. And now the animal was growling inside him, stubborn, and it didn't care about any engagement. He hated it. He hated even more how badly he wanted to turn around and ask her name. The ranch gate appeared at the end of the drive. The Wilder brand burned into the wood. 3 generations of land, of cattle, of name. And under all of it, what nobody in Coldwater ever suspected. The most powerful family in the county weren't ranchers. They were a pack. Wolves who had learned to live in t-shirts and trucks, to hide their teeth behind a handshake, to run the valley without a single human, knowing a pack was breathing in the middle of them. And he was the alpha every one of them bowed their head to. Every one of them, except a woman on a dirt road. He parked and sat in the truck a while. Then he went inside and set about forgetting. It took 2 days for that scent to stop coming back when he least expected it. It was on the porch, late in the afternoon, that Della found him. Old enough to have served his father and his grandfather, housekeeper and one of the pack elders. She didn't miss a thing. Rhett had the construction reports open in his lap, and no desire at all to look at them. "The town wants the bridge and the new Highland Road finished before winter," he said, without looking up. "I need an engineer, somebody who does the job and doesn't go asking what moves through those woods at night. Discreet, somebody I can control." Della dried her hands on her apron, like a woman who had the answer before the question. "You don't need to send away for anybody, sir." She leaned against the doorframe. "Hank hasn't talked about anything else for a week. His daughter's home, came to spend her vacation. An engineer, degree and all, works at a big firm in the city. The whole town knows already. She grew up on this land, and she knows this ground better than any engineer you'd bring in from outside." Hank's daughter. Rhett frowned, trying to remember a girl he hadn't seen in forever. Back then she was just Hank's little girl. Nothing came to mind. "Is she good?" "She's the best you'll find within 200 miles. He closed the folder. "Set up the meeting. I'll talk to her myself." He stood, trying to push away the woman from the road, who had refused to leave his head for 2 days. "What's her name?" "Hazel." Della was already turning back inside, her voice light. "Hazel Dunn." The name went right past him, the way a name goes past when you've never heard it before. Rhett nodded, filed the broken window away in the back of his mind, and had no idea at all that he had just sent for the woman with the rock to come into his own house. It was a knock on the bedroom door at 7 in the morning that pulled Hazel out of the first decent sleep she'd had in months. "Sweetheart." Her father's voice, muffled by the wood. "Sweetheart, wake up." Hazel pushed her face into the pillow. Hank Dunn had that way of talking low that filled the whole house anyway, 30 years of shouting orders across a corral. "Dad, it's 7 in the morning. I'm on vacation." I know. He opened the door a crack, hat already in his hand, his face marked by the sun. "But Mr. Wilder sent word for you to come up to the main house. It's about the bridge work, up in the Highlands. Said he wants to talk to you today." She rolled over in bed, one eye open. "Why me?" Because you're the only engineer these parts have ever seen, sweetheart. He smiled, and in that smile was a pride she'd known since she was a kid, the same as the day she read her first word by herself. Della gave them your name up at the big house. Go on. Do us proud. The main house. The Wilder Ranch. Hazel lay looking at the ceiling for a while, after her father closed the door. The ranch where Hank had given his body his whole life, where she grew up running between fences and trucks while her father worked, always outside the big house, never inside it. And now they were calling her up there, not through the back door, as the ranch foreman's daughter, but through the front, as an engineer. Something in her straightened her back just thinking about it. Half an hour later, she was driving up the packed dirt road in her father's old truck, her hair pulled into a tight ponytail, her shirt pressed, her clipboard on the passenger seat. No mud this time. No little girl. She drove up like a woman who knows what she's worth. The Wilder house was exactly the way she remembered it, and bigger at the same time. Dark wood and stone, wide porches, the family brand burned into the doorway. An older woman met her at the door, white hair pinned up, sharp eyes that went over Hazel head to foot in an instant, and seemed to like what they saw. You must be Hazel, the woman said. I'm Della. I take care of this house. They're waiting for you in the office. Go on in. Hazel thanked her, took a deep breath, and went in. The office was big, maps of the land spread out across the desk, the smell of coffee and leather in the air. Old Walt, the ranch's site foreman since before she was born, was in a chair by the window, and he stood to greet her with a sun-cracked smile. There was another man there, on his feet, leaning against the edge of the desk, sleeves rolled up to his forearms, jaw already locking. Him. The green of those eyes hit her from across the room, and Hazel felt her own body stop in the middle of a step. You? They both said at the same time. Walt looked from one to the other, an eyebrow climbing slowly. The crazy woman with the rock, Rhett said, pushing off the desk. The genius with the pickup, Hazel shot back, without missing a beat. Let me guess, you're the one paying for the job. I'm the one who owns all of this. He straightened up, and the whole room seemed to arrange itself around him without noticing. Rhett Wilder. Wilder. She repeated the name slowly, fitting the pieces together. The owner of the ranch. The owner of the land. The owner of the road where he thought a puddle cleared itself. Of course it was him. Good to know who I'm writing the check to for that window. Walt let out a rough laugh. He made no effort at all to hold back. You two already know each other, seems like, the old man said, enjoying himself. We ran into each other on the road, Hazel answered, her eyes still on Rhett. He was in a hurry. As usual, I imagine. Rhett ignored it. Della gave me your name. He crossed his arms. Said you know this land better than anybody. I need the old bridge rebuilt and the Highland Road opened before winter. I need somebody who does the job, delivers it right, and doesn't go poking around where she wasn't invited. A pause. Discreet. Discreet. Hazel repeated it, almost laughing. You mean somebody who doesn't ask questions. I mean somebody who takes care of the bridge and leaves the rest of the ranch alone. How interesting. She took a step into the room in no hurry. A man with all this money, all this land, and the first thing he asks for isn't competence. It's silence. What's up there in those highlands that makes you so nervous, Mr. Wilder? Something crossed his face. Fast. Walt stopped smiling for a second, and Hazel filed that away too, in a corner of her mind. There's cattle, there's brush, and there's a bridge falling down, Rhett said, his voice harder. And nothing past the bridge is any of the engineer's business. Then maybe you really should bring somebody in from outside. She shrugged, easy. Somebody who won't notice a thing. Should be simpler. Maybe I will. There are people with international resumes who could be here tomorrow. Great. Call them. Hazel smiled, sweet as poison. It'll be a whole lot cheaper to talk an engineer who's never set foot here into signing off on whatever you tell him than one who's known every crack in this ground since she was 7. You don't want competence, you want obedience, and the two rarely come in the same package. Silence dropped over the office. Walt watched the scene like a man watching a good game, not wanting to get in the way. You've got a lot of nerve for somebody who hasn't even been hired yet, Rhett said, low. And you've got a lot of need for control for somebody who swears everything's under control. She held his eyes. We're a bad match. It'll be fun. He didn't look away. Neither did she. For one long second, the two of them just stood there, taking each other's measure, and the air between them got tight in a way that had nothing to do with the job. It was Hazel who broke it. Not because she gave in, because she wanted to be the one to close. I'll take the job. Where do I sign? She said. If it were up to you, I'd turn it down. My father gave his life to this land. If there's a bridge to hold up, I want it held up right, the way he deserved it done back when nobody cared. She picked her clipboard back up. And also because knowing I get to drive you out of your mind every single day until winter already makes it worth it. Walt laughed again, loud. Rhett didn't laugh. He only looked at her. Long. That same look from the road that didn't match any fight. Tomorrow, she said, already at the door. 7 a.m, I start the survey on the old bridge. And she left, leaving behind an old site foreman laughing and an alpha without the last word for the second time in 3 days. Rhett stood looking at the door she'd gone through for too long. That one's going to be trouble, he muttered. She is. Walt got up, picking up his hat, still laughing. But it'll be good to see you take a no once in a while, son. Good for the soul. Rhett didn't answer, because the problem wasn't the no. The problem was the rest. The way his whole body lit up the instant she walked into that office. The wolf pushing up under his skin with every barb she spat without fear. It had been years since he'd felt that alive, and it was exactly a woman he couldn't want who did that to him. He didn't know what to do with it. He only knew he didn't like how much he wanted to test it again. And there was the other thing. She'd noticed the gate before. There was even a gate to notice. She'd caught the scent of what he was hiding just from the way he asked for silence. A human. Curious. Too smart to leave loose in the highlands. Hiring her was a risk. Not hiring her now was worse. The old bridge sat at the far end of the highlands, where the river narrowed between rocks and the pasture gave way to heavy timber. At 7 sharp the next day, Hazel was already there, boots in the mud, clipboard at her hip, tape measure out, the small ranch crew showing up little by little with stakes and levels. At 7:10, Rhett's pickup stopped at the edge of the road. New rear window. She noticed. She didn't comment. He stopped beside her, looking at the river, the span of the bridge, the pilings eaten away by the water. What's the verdict, engineer? The verdict is that whoever built this 40 years ago did good work, and whoever should have been taking care of it since then did nothing. She pointed at the base of one of the pilings, where the water had opened a deep hollow. See that? The river changed course with the floods, and nobody corrected the drainage. Give it 2 more winters and the whole bridge comes down. It isn't the bridge that's old. It's the care that was missing. Rhett looked where she was pointing, then at her. And for the first time, with no barb in his voice. Nobody had seen that. Nobody looked. Hazel shrugged and wrote it down. Sounds like the story of this land. All morning she ran the site. She marked the points, spread the crew out, redid the runoff calculation on the spot when she realized the old design was wrong. The men, who had shown up skeptical about taking orders from a woman, were waiting for her word before touching a stake by the time the morning was over. The oldest one said quietly to the man next to him that it had been 20 years since he'd seen anybody read ground like that. Rhett heard it. He stayed close the whole time, closer than supervising called for. And every time the wind carried him, her scent, sun on grass and wild honey, something under his skin moved and he pushed it back down. "Were you always this bossy?" he asked during a break. "Or did the city teach you?" "Were you always this rude?" she shot back, measuring an angle. "Or is that what money does to a man?" "I'm not rude, I'm direct." "Ah." She finally looked at him, that dangerous half-smile at the corner of her mouth. "That's what every rude man says." He almost laughed. He held it. But she saw him hold it. And to her, that was worth more than if he'd laughed. It was late in the afternoon, when the crew was already packing up, that she noticed the first thing that didn't add up. A stubborn heifer had come down to the edge of the river, and a fallen iron gate was blocking the way. The same one 3 men had tried to lift that morning without getting it off the ground. Rhett was faster than any of them. He went down the bank in one motion and lifted the gate with one hand, effortless, like a man pulling a chair back from a table. Hazel stopped writing. He felt her looking. He set the gate down too fast. "Jim," he said. "Uh-huh." She went back to her notebook, slowly. "Jim." But she filed that away too, in the same corner of her mind where she'd already put the way he got nervous when she mentioned the Highlands. That night, alone on the porch, Rhett took the call he'd been putting off all week. The council. The dry voice of one of the elders on the other end, asking for what it always asked for: the date. The engagement to Camille Voss had been sealed 2 months ago. A blood alliance with one of the strongest packs in the north. Everything settled. Everything convenient. Everything an alpha was supposed to want. All that was left was for him to set a date for the union and be done with it. "Soon," Rhett said, and hung up before the voice on the other end could push. He closed his eyes. No, not her. Far off, up in the Highlands, a wolf howled at the sky, and Rhett felt his own chest answer before reason could forbid it. It was going to be a long summer. The days on the job site turned into a game, and neither one of them would admit they were playing. On Tuesday, Hazel moved the marking on a piling, and Rhett questioned it, just to question it. "You sure about that?" "I've got the degree that says I am." She didn't even stop writing. "What have you got?" "A pickup and an opinion." On Wednesday, he showed up with 2 coffees and handed her one without saying anything, like a man who didn't want it to become a topic. It became a topic. "Is this a bribe?" she asked, taking it. "It's coffee. You've been cranky since 7. "I don't get cranky. I get efficient. It's different." "In your case, it's the same thing." She laughed before she could stop herself. It was short, but it was real, and she saw the corner of his mouth go up in a way she was starting to wait for without meaning to. And that was when she caught herself for the first time, rooting for him to laugh, wanting to win that smile he kept holding back. How absurd. She shook her head and went back to her calculations, furious with herself. He was everything she couldn't stand in a man. It made no sense at all that her heart beat faster every time the black pickup came around the curve. It made no sense. And it beat like that anyway. On Thursday, one of the younger ranch hands spent too long explaining a measurement to her, standing too close, smiling too much. It was nothing. But Rhett appeared from the other side of the site in an instant, his voice low and dry, and sent the kid to check the other side of the river. The hand went. Hazel raised an eyebrow. "Jealousy isn't a good look on the boss, Mr. Wilder." "It isn't jealousy. He was holding up the work." "Uh-huh." She saved the smile for later. "The work. And then there were the other things. the ones she kept in that corner of her mind. The way he caught a conversation from the far side of the site that nobody should have been able to hear. The night she swore she'd seen a shape too big to be a dog crossing the pasture behind her parents' house. The way the cattle moved away from him and at the same time never ran, like they knew something the humans didn't. She was an engineer. She didn't believe in things that didn't add up. And with Rhett Wilder, almost nothing added up. It was on Friday that they went up alone. The morning rain had left the ground heavy, and the stretch of old road still left to survey was too far out to take the whole crew across terrain like that. Hazel went first, clipboard in hand, boots sinking into the soft dirt. Rhett behind her, arms crossed, never missing a chance. "Careful, city engineer." His voice loaded with mockery. "There isn't even cell service up here. If you fall, nobody hears you. I work in the field, not in an office with air conditioning." She didn't even look back. Unlike certain landowners who only know the pretty part of their own ranch. "I know every inch of this place." She climbed another stretch in silence. And she caught herself doing it again, looking at him. Rhett was right behind her, his shirt stuck to his back from the climb, his forearms cut with muscle. That way of walking that belongs to a man who has never doubted a single step in his life. The sun hit him in a way that wasn't fair to the rest of the world. Her stomach turned over in a way that had nothing to do with the hill. "Get a grip, Hazel." She nailed her eyes to the ground ahead of her. The man is a narcissist. He thinks the road is his, that the puddle obeys him, that the world clears out of the way when he walks through. He thinks he's the center of everything. You are not attracted to that. Ever. You are not attracted to a man who has never heard a no in his life and figures he's doing the planet a favor every time he leaves the house. She looked at him again. Damn it. Rhett caught her looking halfway there, and the corner of his mouth went up, that unbearable half-smile of a man who had noticed everything. What? Nothing. She looked away too fast for it to be nothing. "I was calculating how much weight this bank holds before it gives." "Uh-huh." His voice loaded with mockery. "The bank. Shut up and walk." And because she needed to get away from him and from her own stomach, she grabbed the first thing her engineer's brain could find to put her eyes on anything that wasn't that man. "So tell me." She pointed ahead, to where the brush got thicker. "What's that back there, behind the tree line? It isn't on any map you gave me." Rhett didn't answer right away, and that was the last thing Hazel noticed before the ground disappeared out from under her. A dry crack. The earth gave way like a mouth opening, the brush that covered it all coming down with her. She didn't even have time to scream properly, only the world turning over, her stomach coming up, and the impact. "Hazel!" Dark. Cold. The smell of old dirt and wet stone. She opened her eyes at the bottom of a deep hole, a dry well somebody had opened there who knows how long ago, and covered with rotted boards that time had eaten through. Up above, a circle of sky and Rhett's face leaning over the edge, his eyes wide in a way she had never seen. "Are you in one piece?" His voice came out different, not a trace of mockery. "Hazel, talk to me." "I'm fine." She tested her arms, her legs, her aching hip. "I'm in one piece." She looked around. The dirt walls too high, too smooth. My chances of getting out of here on my own, maybe not. "Don't move. I'm coming down." "Rhett, the ground's loose, don't..." He was already climbing down. He found a hold on a root, then on a rock, that big body balancing with an agility that shouldn't have fit in a man that size, another thing for the corner of her mind. And then the edge gave. "Look out!" she yelled. Too late. Rhett slid the last few feet and fell, and she barely had time to curl up before he landed beside her in a heavy drop, one arm going over her on reflex, protecting her head from the wall. The silence that came after took the breath out of both of them. The two of them at the bottom of the well, pressed together, the dust settling slowly around them. "Great," Hazel said, her face inches from his. "Now we're two idiots in a hole. You fell first. You jumped in after me, that's worse. At least I've got physics as an excuse." He moved back far enough to check his phone. Nothing. He held it up, turned it, searched. Nothing. "No signal," he said. "You told me there was no service up here." She leaned back against the dirt wall and closed her eyes for a second. "Congratulations, you were right. Nobody's going to hear us." Rhett tried the wall. He looked for a hold, a root, a rock, anything. The dirt crumbled in his hand. He could climb out. He knew he could, with the strength he had, if he were alone and didn't have to hide what he was. But with her there, watching, human, far too observant, he couldn't just haul himself out of that hole like a bucket of water out of a well. So he stopped, and he sat down beside her, their shoulders touching. "Somebody's going to notice we're gone," he said. "Walt knows we came up here. When we don't come back down, he'll come. Before or after dark. Depends on his mood." Hazel laughed, tired, and the laugh echoed faintly off the walls. The sun went down up above, the circle of sky turning the color of fire, then purple. It got cold. She wrapped her arms around her knees, and without a word, Rhett took off his jacket and put it around her shoulders. She stopped shivering. Not because of the jacket. "Why do you irritate me so much?" she asked quietly, without looking at him. "You first." "I asked first." He was quiet for a while. When he spoke, his voice came out lower, more honest than she expected. "Because you don't back down." He was looking straight ahead, into the dark. "My whole life people agree with me before I finish the sentence. You didn't. Not once, and I don't know what to do with that." Hazel turned her face toward him. They were close. Too close for two people who had spent the week swearing they couldn't stand each other. "That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me. Don't tell anybody." One corner of his mouth went up. "It ruins my reputation." She was going to answer. She had something sharp on the tip of her tongue, she always did. But he turned his face too, and the answer died. Because suddenly the only thing between them was air, and there wasn't much air. His eyes went down to her mouth, came back. "Don't do that," she whispered, and even she didn't know if it was an order or a request. "Don't do what?" "Look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you're about to forget we hate each other." The dark swallowed what was left of good sense. She was the one who closed the distance, or he was. Neither of them could say afterward. They only knew that one mouth found the other, and that there was nothing gentle about it. It was pure hunger, a whole week of barbs and provocation coming down all at once. He pulled her in by the waist. She grabbed his shirt with both hands, and the kiss went deeper, urgent, hot. Both of them forgetting the cold, the hole, the world up above. Her back found the dirt wall, and he went with her, that big body covering hers, his mouth going down her jaw, her neck, and she let her head fall back and heard her own breathing come apart. His hand went up the side of her body, firm, and she pulled him closer by the back of his neck, her fingers in his dark hair. And for a moment, there was no engineer and no boss, no pride, no road, no rock. Only that. Only the heat of the two of them at the bottom of the dark, going somewhere there'd be no coming back from. And that was when a beam of light cut across the circle of sky up above. "Rhett?" Walt's voice far off. "You two down there?" They came apart like people touching a hot coal, breathing hard, the dust dancing in the flashlight beam. Hazel pulled the jacket tighter around her shoulders and looked anywhere but at him. Rhett dragged a hand over his face, his breathing still uneven. "We're down here," he shouted, his voice rough. "Bring rope." It took a while for the rope to come down. Hazel tied it around her waist first, and Walt and another hand pulled from up top. When it was Rhett's turn, the rope wouldn't reach right, caught on a ledge of stone in the wall, a slab set into the dirt that was in the way of the climb. "Hold on," Walt shouted. "Let me see if I can work that loose." "No need," Rhett said, and with both hands, he took hold of the slab. Hazel, already up top, looked down at exactly the right moment. She saw him tear a rock out of the wall that all three men together couldn't have moved, tear it out like a man pulling off a loose board, the muscles in his back going tight under his shirt. And she saw, in the dark at the bottom of the well, his eyes shine. Gold. A flash of gold, alive. That wasn't the reflection of any flashlight, because the flashlight was pointed the other way. It lasted a second. Then the green came back, and he came up the rope like an ordinary man, and stepped onto the edge of the well breathing hard, and nobody else seemed to have seen a thing. "Jim," Hazel said quietly to herself, looking at him. But this time, the word didn't even convince her. Before she got into the truck, she looked one last time down into the hole, and the engineer in her caught what the fright had let slip past. That wasn't a hole. Down at the bottom, where the earth had collapsed, there was stone showing. Cut stone, fitted by hand, curved. A well built by people who knew what they were doing. And old, very old, capped on purpose, and swallowed by the brush until it turned into a trap. A mine doesn't have walls like that. A ranch well doesn't sit hidden in the middle of the highlands, miles from any house, off every map. Somebody built that up here, and made a point of making it disappear. She filed the image away in the same corner of her mind, where the iron gate and the gold eyes already were, the corner of what didn't add up. On the way back, the truck rattling down the dirt road, the two of them were quiet for a long time. "Thank you," she said at last, her eyes on the window, "for coming down after me. It was stupid, but thank you." It was stupid. Rhett was holding the wheel hard. "Tomorrow you walk in front." "So I can fall first again?" "No." He looked at her for a second, and looked away. "Because if I fall again, now I know the fall is worth it." Her heart gave a jolt she hated. She didn't answer. She sat watching the dark go by, her body still warm where he'd touched her, her head spinning around two things that didn't add up any way she turned them. A rock no man lifts alone, and a pair of eyes that went gold at the bottom of a hole. And underneath all of it, the one thing she couldn't file away in any corner of her mind at all, that she had wanted that kiss, that she had wanted a whole lot more than a kiss, and that if Walt had taken 5 more minutes, she would have let it happen. Damn it. Rhett drove the rest of the way fighting with himself. The taste of her was still in his mouth. His whole body was still asking. And the wolf, the one he'd spent the entire week trying to shout down out of sheer stubbornness, was roaring now, loose, no brakes, one single word hitting his ribs with every mile. Hers. He was hers. Hers. He stopped in front of the Dunn house, waited for her to get out, watched the porch light come on and her shape disappear through the door. Only then did he bring his fist down on the wheel. Once. Hard. Because there was something she didn't know and that he couldn't forget for even a second, no matter how much that kiss told him to. There was a woman up north who already called herself his. A sealed engagement. A council asking for a date. And he, Rhett Wilder, had just found out, at the bottom of a well, that he didn't want her. He wanted the one who threw the rock. He brought his fist down on the wheel once, hard, and it didn't help at all. There was no undoing what had happened at the bottom of that well. There was no getting off his skin the way she'd grabbed his shirt. or the sound she made when his mouth went down her neck. His head, for the first time in weeks, was clear. And all it wanted to think about was that woman. He drove up the ranch road determined to do something impossible. Forget. That was when he saw the lights of the big house on. All of them. Rhett slowed the truck. There was a car in front of the porch that he knew far too well. His stomach dropped before reason caught up. He went in. Camille Voss was in the living room, barefoot on the rug, like a woman who already felt she owned it, holding a glass of water, her blonde hair falling perfectly over a pale dress. She smiled when she saw him, a calm smile, trained, without a thread of warmth in it. "Hi, baby." She lifted the glass in a lazy salute. "Surprise." Rhett stood in the doorway, still with the dirt from the well on his clothes, his heart beating for a reason that had nothing to do with this. "Camille, what are you doing here?" What a warm welcome. She crossed the room to him, slid a hand over his chest, and made a face when she felt the dirt on his shirt. "You're filthy. Have you been playing rancher?" "I asked what you're doing here." "I'm your fiancé, Rhett." Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes went a degree colder. "We've been engaged for 2 months. The elders are waiting on a date. And you disappear, you don't call back, you leave me up north looking like a woman her own fiancé forgot about." She shrugged, elegant. "I got tired of waiting for you to come to me. So I came." He didn't answer right away. The last time they'd been together was up north, the night the council sealed the engagement 2 months ago. A night he could barely remember. A blur of wine and exhaustion, he'd woken up alone from the next morning, his head heavy. Not really sure what had happened. Since then, he'd done nothing but avoid her. And that was when she tilted her head, those eyes going over him slowly, reading something he hadn't said. "You're different." Her voice dropped, almost curious. "There's something about you." She smiled again, but this time there were claws under it. "A woman notices these things, you know, when her fiancé's head is somewhere else." The wolf inside him went very quiet. "You're tired from the trip," Rhett said, stepping back. "Della will make up a room. We'll talk tomorrow." Tomorrow. Camille went to the sideboard, filled a glass with his wine, and brought it over to him, her fingers lingering on his when she handed it over. "Drink. You're tense. This relaxes you." She waited. She didn't speak again until he'd brought the glass to his mouth. "Tomorrow I want to see this whole ranch, every corner of it, everything that's going to be mine, including where you spend your days." Rhett drank, distracted, and for a second something bitter under the wine struck him as strange. Then he forgot it. A warm weight started coming down behind his eyes, and he blamed it on the drive. "The job site is no place for you. It's mud, it's machines, it's men yelling. I'll manage." Her smile got sweeter and sharper at the same time. "Don't you worry about me, baby." Rhett went up to his own room alone that night and lay a long time looking at the ceiling in the dark. Far off, up in the highlands, no wolf howled. And inside him, the thing that had been roaring on the way home, that name, that certainty, was already getting harder to hear, as if somebody had thrown a first blanket over his wolf. He blamed it on being tired, on the shock of finding his fiancée in the living room. He had no way of knowing that it wasn't tiredness, that the fog had a beginning, and a glass, and a hand, and that from then on, it was going to come down over him a little heavier every night. Hazel got to the site at 7 sharp, like always, and knew something had changed before she got out of the truck. There was an expensive car parked at the edge of the site, out of place in that world of dirt and iron. And next to Rhett's pickup, a woman, tall, blonde. A pale, expensive dress that didn't go with any mud, dark glasses, her heels sinking a little into the dirt with every step, and even so she walked like the ground was the one that owed her an apology. Rhett was standing beside her, his body rigid, his jaw locked in a way Hazel had never seen on him. He didn't look happy to be standing there with that woman, but the woman looked delighted. Hazel got out, clipboard in hand, and walked toward the group because there was no way not to. Rhett watched her come, and for an instant something crossed his face. Guilt, maybe, or warning. Hazel. His voice came out formal. A wall. This is Camille, my fiancé. The world didn't stop. Hazel wished it had, because then it would have hurt less. Instead, it kept turning. The sun kept shining. The men kept working in the background, and she kept standing there, with the one difference that something inside her chest had just cracked without making a sound. Fiancé. She had kissed that man at the bottom of a well, less than 24 hours earlier. She had wanted a whole lot more than a kiss. She smiled. It was the best-made smile of her life. Nice to meet you, Camille. She put out her hand, firm, clean. Congratulations on the engagement. Camille took her glasses off slowly and shook her hand with 2 cold fingers, taking Hazel in head to foot, the tied-back hair, the dirty boots, the work shirt. The pleasure's mine. Her voice was sugar over ice. So you're the engineer. I've heard so much. The whole town raves about you. A calculated pause. It must be hard, I imagine, working so closely with a man as demanding as Rhett, day after day. I like a challenge. Hazel held her eyes without blinking, and I let the work speak for me. How admirable. Camille smiled, and the smile didn't reach her eyes. Especially in a woman who's so simple. No fuss. I'll bet the men here love that. They love an engineer who keeps the job standing. Hazel gave the smile back at the same temperature. It's rare these days, people who keep anything standing. For a second the 2 women's eyes locked, and neither of them gave an inch, and the air between them went thin as glass. Rhett looked from one to the other, and knew he was walking through a minefield disguised as good manners. Camille came to see the land, he said, trying to cut it off. Let's not hold up the work. Hazel, what do we have for today? We don't have anything. Hazel turned back to her clipboard, her voice professional again, wiped clean of everything. I have the base of the second piling to close before noon. Excuse me. And she walked away, walking steady, giving orders to the crew, without looking back once. She held it until she got to the container that served as the site office. She went in, closed the door, and only then leaned against the metal wall and let her shoulders drop. Idiot. What an idiot you are, Hazel. The first tear came hot, and she wiped it away angrily, because she wasn't crying out of sadness. She was crying out of shame. Shame at having believed in a kiss. Shame at having let a man she barely knew make her heart beat like that. He knew. In the well, on the road, in every barb, he already had a woman waiting up north, and he kissed her anyway. She wasn't anybody's distraction. She wasn't anybody's doubt. She wasn't anybody's second place. She dried her face, redid her hair, took a deep breath. When she came out of the container, 5 minutes later, nobody would have said she'd been crying, but something in her had hardened, not out of coldness, out of decision. Rhett Wilder was going to stop existing for her, starting right then. The days that came after were an exercise in pretending on both sides. Hazel worked like never before. She got there earlier, left later, ran the site with a grip that left no opening for conversation. When Rhett tried to talk to her about anything that wasn't concrete and steel, she answered short and went back to work. He deserved it. She knew he deserved it. And it hurt anyway. Camille stayed. She circled the ranch in pale dresses, showed up at the site whenever she felt like it, always with some sweet comment that scratched, about the sun that was going to ruin Hazel's skin, about how brave it was to work in a place so dull, about how lucky Rhett was to have somebody so dedicated looking after his things, while she looked after what mattered. Hazel learned to hand every one of them back without raising her voice, and to hate the fact that it burned energy she'd rather spend on something else. And there was one night, on the porch of the big house, that nobody saw. Camille poured Rhett a glass of wine he hadn't asked for. "Drink, baby." She set the glass in his hand, her fingers lingering on his. "You've been so tired, so far away. This will help you sleep." He drank, distracted, his eyes on the dark of the pasture, thinking about the wrong woman. And the next day the fog in his head was heavier than ever. And he blamed it, as always, on being tired. Downstairs in the kitchen, Camille washed the glass, dried it, and put the little amber bottle back in the bottom of her purse. 1 drop a night. That was what the healer up north had said. 1 drop a night and he won't catch the scent of anything. Not the truth. Not you. Not even his own instincts. Rhett tried to talk to Hazel once. Just once. He found her alone near the river at the end of a day, packing up her equipment. "Hazel. Mr. Wilder." She didn't even turn around. "Do you need something on the job?" "About the well." "There's no well." She snapped the toolbox shut and finally looked at him, her eyes steady, not a drop of hurt showing, because the hurt was hers, and she wasn't going to hand it over. "There's a bridge to get standing before winter, and that's the only thing we need to talk about. Good night." And she left. Rhett stood there at the edge of the river watching her go, the fog pressing behind his eyes, the wolf silenced, the fiancé waiting in his house, and the only woman who made his head clear walking away, thinking he was the worst kind of man. Maybe he was. He went home and didn't drink the wine Camille offered him that night. He couldn't have said why. He just didn't drink it. It was Della who mentioned it the next morning, stringing banners along the porch. 3 days to the Harvest Moon Festival. The old woman looked up at the sky, at the thin slice of moon growing over the mountains. The whole town will be there. A pause. And ours too, in their own way. It's the choosing season, sir. The moon's filling up. Rhett knew what that meant for the pack. The time when the unmated feel the call, when the blood pulls toward its match. For years he'd gone through that moon feeling nothing. This year he felt it, and it wasn't for his fiancée. In the living room behind him, Camille appeared with 2 dresses in her hand, glowing. "A festival." She held the dresses up. "How adorable, small towns. We're going, obviously, together. I want everybody to see Rhett Wilder's fiancée." Her eyes shone. Absolutely everybody. Rhett looked out the window toward town, where an engineer with wild hair was probably already awake, swearing she didn't care about him anymore. 3 days. The Coldwater Town Square was unrecognizable. It was so pretty. Banners crossed the sky end to end, yellow lights hung between the poles, hay bales had turned into benches, and the smell of roasted corn and candy apples mixed with the music coming off the bandstand. The whole town had come out. Kids ran between grown-ups' legs, old folks danced slow, and for a moment, Hazel, standing at the entrance to the square in a light dress with her hair down, almost forgot why she'd spent the whole week with a crack in her chest. Then she saw them. Rhett was near the bandstand, in a pale shirt, better looking than he had any right to be. And on his arm, pressed close, glowing, in an expensive dress with sparkle in her earrings, was Camille, the perfect couple. The town came up to say hello, to shake his hand, to compliment the fiancé, and Camille took all of it like a woman who already owned the place. Hazel took a deep breath. She got a cup of juice at the first booth, faked interest in anything that wasn't that, and promised herself she was going to have a good time even if she had to force it. Across the square, Rhett was barely hearing what people said to him. The moon was almost full over the mountains, and with it came the call, that old pull in the blood that the choosing season woke in the unmated of the pack, instinct pushing every wolf toward its match. For years, Rhett had gone through that time feeling nothing but the fog. This year the call had a name, and it wasn't the name of the woman hanging on his arm. He felt Hazel come into the square before he saw her, her scent crossing the air over everything else, sun on grass and wild honey, and his whole body turned that direction like a compass needle. He forced his eyes back to the front. "Are you listening to me, baby?" Camille squeezed his arm, her smile sweet, her eyes sharp. "I asked if we were going to dance." "Later," he said. "A lot of people to greet." One of the ladies at a booth offered Camille a cup of the festival's mulled wine. She turned it down with the sweetest smile in the world. "No, thank you. I'm staying off it these days." And she rested her hand lightly on her stomach, a quick gesture nobody noticed. Yet, Camille followed the line of his eyes across the square, all the way to the woman with the loose hair and the light dress, and her smile didn't drop a single degree. But something behind it went very quiet, very attentive. She didn't say anything. She just filed it away. "Where are the single girls in this town?" The voice of Miss Dolly, who had been running the festival since before Hazel was born, cut across the square like a bell. The old woman came through, dragging girls by the arm toward a booth decorated with paper hearts and little lights. "We're short on pretty girls at the kissing booth. Come on, Hazel Dunn. You of all people are going to turn down tradition after disappearing all these years." "Miss Dolly, for the love of—" Hazel laughed, backing up. "I'm way too old for a kissing booth." "Old, my foot! 10 little minutes, honey, it's for charity." The old woman was already hauling her along. "You never know, a good catch might turn up." The childhood friends standing nearby started clapping and whistling, and there was no way out of it. Laughing and complaining at the same time, Hazel was pushed into the booth, got a straw hat with ribbons put on her head, and sat down on the little stool behind the decorated counter, feeling like the most ridiculous thing in the world. Across the square, she saw Rhett turn his head toward the booth. She saw his jaw lock, and just for that, she lifted her chin and smiled at the first man in line. That was when a voice cut through the noise, loud and easy, the voice of a man enjoying himself. "I'd like to buy all of this lady's kisses." A pause, and the smile in the voice. "For the whole night." The line opened up. Miss Dolly's eyes went wide, and Hazel, from the stool, looked up and felt her jaw drop. "Wesley?" He was taller than she remembered, his brown hair cut neat, a linen shirt open at the collar, his smile exactly the same as when he was 15. Wesley Cole. The boy from the house next to her grandmother's. The first boy she ever kissed behind the barn on a summer afternoon. The first love who went away to school and disappeared out of her life the way a childhood dream disappears. "Hi, Hazel." He put both arms on the counter of the booth, his eyes on hers. "Looks like I got here at the right time." She came out from behind the stool and hugged him before she thought about it, laughing, and there were years inside that hug. "What are you doing here? Don't you live in the city? You became a doctor and everything." "Came to see my grandmother." He pulled back just far enough to look at her. "And ended up with the best night I've had in a long time. You look—" He shook his head, suddenly shy, the boy again. "You look exactly the way I remembered. And completely different. In the good way. And you've still got a dangerously smooth tongue, Wesley Cole." She took his hand and pulled him out of the booth, to the relief of Miss Dolly, who already had the charity money in her hand. "Come on. Get me out of this embarrassment before the whole town takes pictures." And because he'd paid, and because laughing felt good, she leaned in and gave him a light, quick kiss, a thank you. "That," Wesley said, smiling, "was cheap for what I paid." "Don't push it," she laughed, light for the first time in days. "Come on, Doc. Buy me a candy apple with the change." Rhett saw all of it. He saw the man lean on the counter of the booth. He saw Hazel come out from under that ridiculous hat and hug him like a woman hugging a piece of her own life. He saw the kiss. Most of all, he saw the way she laughed. Loose, whole, alive. The way she never laughed around him. Because around him, all she did was fight. The cup in his hand almost cracked. "Baby?" Camille beside him followed his eyes with an icy smile. "You're tense." "Too much noise," he said, his voice tight. "Parties wear me out." She turned the cup in her hand without lifting it to her mouth. That must be it. He couldn't stand still. He left a bee right back hanging in the air and crossed the square before reason could catch up, and cut Hazel off just as she and the doctor were walking past, laughing about something. "Hazel, I need to talk to you. 1 minute." She stopped. The laugh died on her face, but her chin stayed up. "Not now, Rhett. I'm with someone." "I saw." His eyes went to Wesley over her shoulder, hard. Wesley, easy about it, didn't back off. "Everything all right, Hazel?" "It's fine." She didn't take her eyes off Rhett. "Give me 1 second." Wesley nodded and stepped away a few paces, polite, and Hazel crossed her arms. "Talk. Who is he?" She almost laughed at the nerve. "Are you serious?" She dropped her voice, cutting. "Wesley. Childhood friend. My first love. A doctor. And unlike certain people, he knows exactly what he wants. You look pretty comfortable with him." "It's a party, Rhett. That's what people do at a party." She took a step forward, her eyes flashing. "Or did you expect to find me crying in a corner while you parade around arm in arm with your fiancé? You're losing your mind with jealousy over a man who treats me well, and you've got a woman waiting at your house. Do you hear how that sounds?" Her voice dropped, steady as steel. "Make up your mind. But make it up far away from me." She turned her back and took Wesley's hand again, and the smile came back to her face like erasing Rhett was the easiest thing in the world, even though it wasn't. Rhett stood planted in the middle of the square, burning, with no right at all to feel what he was feeling. And that was exactly the moment Camille chose. She appeared beside him, slid her hand along his arm, and spoke loudly enough for Hazel, who hadn't gotten 2 steps away yet, to hear every word. "Baby, I think now is the perfect time." Camille turned half toward him, half toward everyone around them, her face shining with victory disguised as emotion. "I was going to wait, but I can't hold it in anymore." She brought her hand to her own stomach, her eyes wet in exactly the right measure. "I'm pregnant, Rhett. We're having a baby." The world this time really did stop. The people around them let out exclamations, applause, congratulations. Rhett went white, his mouth open with no sound in it, and Hazel, 3 steps away, felt the whole ground go out from under her feet. A baby. She looked at Rhett. Rhett looked at her, only for an instant. But the whole instant, that look of a person who knows exactly what the other one is feeling because they're feeling the same thing. Camille saw the two of them look at each other, and smiled. Wesley next to Hazel touched her elbow lightly. "Hey," his voice, low, kind. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." She pulled her eyes off Rhett, locked everything away inside in a single motion, and smiled at Wesley. "I'm great. Take me away from here, Wesley?" "Anywhere you want." She left holding the doctor's hand, without looking back, her whole body shaking on the inside and nothing showing on the outside. Behind her, in the middle of the lit-up square, the king of the pack stood frozen where he was, surrounded by people clapping over a baby, with his heart walking away hand in hand with another man. And beside him, smiling at the crowd with her hand on her stomach, Camille Voss was finally sure she wasn't going to lose. Wesley drove slowly down the dirt road, the festival lights disappearing in the rearview mirror, and for a while neither of them said anything. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked finally, without taking his eyes off the road. "About what?" Hazel was looking out the window, the dark town going by. "About the way you looked at that man when his fiancée dropped the news." His voice was kind, no pressure in it. "I'm a doctor, Hazel. I know how to read pain." She closed her eyes for a second. "There's nothing to talk about. He has a fiancée. He's having a baby. End of story." Wesley stopped the truck in front of the Dunn house and let the engine die. He sat there looking at her. "You're different from what I remember. You know that? Stronger. More of a woman. But the way you smile when you forget to protect yourself is exactly the same as the girl I kissed behind the barn." She laughed quietly, tired. "You've still got a dangerously smooth tongue." "I still just tell the truth." He leaned in slowly, giving her all the time in the world to pull back. And when she didn't pull back, he put his lips on hers. It was a soft kiss. Tender. The kiss of a man who had always wanted and never stopped wanting. And Hazel didn't kiss him back. She didn't push him away. She just let it happen, quiet, and felt with a clarity that hurt that there was no fire in it. There was affection. There was history. There was the comfort of a safe harbor. But her body didn't shake. Not the way it had shaken at the bottom of a well, with a man she was supposed to hate. Wesley pulled back and read everything on her face in an instant. "I felt that," he said quietly, without bitterness. "There's somebody in there, and it isn't me. Wesley, it's all right." He smiled, and the smile was honest. "I'm not going to pretend it didn't hurt, but I'm also not going to fight for a place that's already taken. Take care of yourself, Hazel. That's the only thing I came back to this town to ask for, to see you doing well." She squeezed his hand, grateful that he existed, and sad that she couldn't want the easy thing. "Good night, Wesley." "Good night." She went into the house and didn't turn on the light. She stood in the dark kitchen, leaning against the counter, and only there, alone, let the first tear fall. Not for the kiss that happened, for the one that didn't happen in a well, days before, when there was still time. Camille came looking for her 2 days later, at the site, late in the afternoon, when the crew had already gone home. Hazel was rolling up the drawings from the makeshift table when the smell of expensive perfume arrived before its owner did. The fiancé came walking across the site in a pale dress, spotless in the middle of all that dirt, and stopped on the other side of the table with the smile of a woman who had rehearsed it. Such dedication. Camille looked around at the sawhorses, the stakes, the mud. "Working this late, all alone, on my fiancé's land. It's what engineers do." Hazel didn't even stop rolling the drawing. "Work. You know, I came to thank you." Camille's voice was pure honey. "Really. Handling all of this while Red is so busy with me, with the baby, with our plans. It's such a relief to know there's somebody competent holding it all together. Somebody who knows her place." Hazel raised her eyes, slowly. "My place is wherever I decide it is, Camille. I've never needed anybody to tell me where that is." For an instant, the fiancé's smile went thin. Then it came back, sweeter and sharper. "I'm going to give you some advice, woman to woman." She leaned slightly over the table. "I don't lose, ever. Least of all to somebody who walks into a game without knowing the rules. Red is mine. The baby is ours. And before long, you'll finish that bridge, go back to your big city, and this whole thing here turns into a dull little memory of one summer out in the country." She straightened up. "It would be a shame for you to get hurt over something that's already taken." Hazel held her eyes without blinking. On the inside, every word was a needle. On the outside, nothing. You can relax." Her voice came out clean, no tremor in it. "I don't want anything that's already taken. I never have." A pause. "But if you have to come all the way out here to warn me, drenched in perfume, at the end of a workday, maybe the problem isn't what I want. Maybe it's what you're not sure you have." Camille's face hardened for good. Her mouth opened and closed with no sound. She turned on her heel and left, stamping through the dirt she hated, and Hazel stood there, alone on the site, shaking only after the car was gone. She won that exchange, and it didn't help at all. Because the score that mattered, Camille had already won the day she put her hand on her stomach in the middle of the town square. Rhett hadn't been sleeping right for days. It was always the same thing when he closed his eyes. That night, 2 months ago, up north, at the party where the council sealed the engagement, the wine, his head going heavy too early, and then nothing. A blur. He'd woken up alone in the room the next morning, his mouth bitter, unable to remember half the night, and at the time, he'd blamed the drinking and hadn't thought about it again. Now that night was the only thing he thought about. Did it happen? Did it not happen? He turned the memory over and couldn't find the floor. And every time he got close to the truth, the fog closed over everything again. That same heavy mist that had been living behind his eyes for weeks, and that only lifted he had noticed, and hated that he'd noticed, when a certain engineer was nearby. It wasn't that he hadn't suspected. He had suspected. A man doesn't go months with his head full of mist and think that's normal. He'd combed through his own routine looking for an explanation, cut out coffee, went to bed early, even sent one of the betas to scent the whole bedroom for wolfsbane, the only thing he knew could bend a wolf. The beta found nothing, because what was there wasn't the raw wolfsbane any nose picks up. It was the other kind, refined, the kind with no smell. And worst of all, the only part of him that could have sounded the alarm, the instinct, the nose, the wolf, was exactly the part being blinded. He was trying to see his own fog with the eyes the fog put out first. It was like asking a blind man to describe the dark. A wolf knows his own blood. It should have been simple. All he should have had to do was get close to Camille, to her belly, and instinct would know, from the inside out, whether that pup carried his scent. And Alpha felt his own blood the way he felt his own hand. But his wolf was mute, drowned. Every time he got near Camille and tried to feel something, all he found was that gray mist and an emptiness he didn't know how to read. One afternoon, he forced himself to do what he'd been putting off. He went over to Camille on the couch, sat down beside her, and tried to feel. He closed his eyes and searched. Nothing. Only the same gray mist and an emptiness where the certainty should have been. He moved away with his heart out of rhythm and couldn't tell whether the emptiness was the drug or whether it was the truth. "You're tearing yourself up for nothing," Della said one night, setting down a tea he hadn't asked for. The old woman looked at him with those ancient eyes that saw too much. A healthy wolf would know. He'd feel the pup the way he feels his own heartbeat. If you're not feeling anything, Mr. Rhett, either there's something wrong with the pup, or there's something wrong with you. "There's nothing wrong with me," he said, short. Della didn't answer right away. She only looked at the glass of wine Camille had left on the table, half full, then at him, and kept what she was thinking to herself before she left. On the other side of the house, in the guest room that had already become hers, Camille was talking quietly on the phone with the door locked. "Stop calling me." Her voice, with no sugar in it now. "You've said it's yours. You've said it 1,000 times. It isn't. It won't be. Get out of my life, Derek." She hung up, took a breath, pulled the amber bottle out of her purse and measured the drop against the light. "You disappear too," she murmured to the fog she dripped into her fiancé's drink every night, and went downstairs with the smile already in place. Rhett drank half the glass that night. Then he stopped. He couldn't have said why. He just pushed the rest away, and for an instant, one single instant before he fell asleep, the fog pulled back enough for him to think of a name he shouldn't. Hazel. He decided, there in the dark, that he was going to do the right thing. Stay. Claim the child, his or not, because a man doesn't abandon a child that might be his. Marry Camille. Be the alpha the pack expected. And bury, with his own hands, the only thing in years that had made his head clear. But first he needed to tell her. Once. The whole truth. Even if it changed nothing. He found her at the end of the next day, at the creek. He should have guessed it was there. The swimming hole hidden in the woods, ringed with stone, where the river went quiet in a clean, still pool. Hank had told him years before that his daughter had called that place My River since she was a little girl. She was sitting on a flat rock at the edge, her feet in the water, her hair loose, and she didn't turn around when she heard his steps. Her shoulders just went hard. "You've got a talent for showing up where you weren't invited," she said. "I know." He stopped a few steps away. "Give me 5 minutes. Then I'll go and I won't come looking for you again. I promise." "There's nothing to say, Rhett." "There is." His voice came out different. No wall, no order, nothing of the man who ran an entire room just by walking into it. And I should have said it a long time ago. She didn't tell him to stay. But she didn't send him away either, and he took that as the only invitation he was going to get. "I should have told you about the engagement on the first day." He was looking at the water, not at her, because it was easier. "I didn't. And it wasn't out of cruelty. It was because every time we got near each other it turned into a fight. We never had a minute. One single calm minute to talk like two normal people. It was barbs. It was provocation. It was you driving me out of my mind and me loving being driven out of it. There was never any room for me to say, look, there's something you need to know." Hazel kept looking at the water, but she stopped moving her feet. And then came the well. His voice went lower. And down at the bottom of that hole, in the dark, with you, everything made sense to me. Everything. For the first time in a long while, my head was clear, and I knew exactly what I wanted. And it wasn't the job, and it wasn't the North, and it wasn't anything they'd decided for me. It was you. I was going to tell you everything. I was going to fix everything. That same night. She closed her eyes. "But when I got home," he went on, "she was already there, moved in, bags and all. And there wasn't time for anything, Hazel. There wasn't time to breathe. The next day she showed up at the site, and you looked at me like I was the worst thing in the world, and you had every right to look at me that way. And every time I tried to get near you after that, you cut me off, you disappeared, you shut the door in my face. And I let you, because I figured it was what you wanted." He finally looked at her. "But I couldn't leave without you knowing that Kiss was real. That it wasn't a game. That I wasn't playing with you. Forgive me for not saying it sooner. That's the only thing I came to ask for." Hazel turned toward him, and he saw in her face that she had believed every word. He saw her eyes shine with held-back water, saw her chin tremble once before it steadied. He saw that she felt the same thing. And it was worse, 1,000 times worse, than if she had laughed in his face. "I believe you," she said, her voice low and cracked. "That's the cruelest part. I believe every word." She stood up off the rock, her wet feet in the dirt. "And it doesn't change anything. Hazel." "No. Now you listen." She took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her voice came out steady, even with her eyes full. "If we'd had time, maybe. If you'd said something. If she hadn't shown up, if. But we didn't have time, Rhett. And now it isn't about us anymore. There's a baby. A child who didn't ask to be born in the middle of this mess, who's going to need his father whole, present, not in halves. The first tear fell, and she didn't even bother wiping it away. And I'm not going to be the woman standing between a child and his father. I'm not going to be a footnote in your life. I'm not going to be the shadow of a story that never got settled. I deserve to be somebody's choice, Rhett. Not what was left over. He took a step toward her, and she raised her hand, and he stopped. No. Her voice broke completely. If you come any closer, I won't be able to do this. And I need to be able to. He stopped. And he stood there, the most powerful man in that county, with no power at all over the one thing he wanted. Go take care of your child, she said, lower, almost a whisper. Be good to him. And forget me. Because that's what good people do when it can't happen. She walked past him without touching him, went up the trail and didn't look back once. Rhett stayed alone at the edge of her river, with the sound of the water and the scent already leaving, and felt, for the first time in years, his own chest crack in a way not even the fog could muffle. She packed her bag that same night. There was no drama, no crying in front of anybody. Hazel folded her clothes, put the drawings in a folder, and wrote a short note for Walt, explaining that the base of both pilings was already calculated and that the crew knew what to do, that if there were any questions they should call. She left everything in order. She always left everything in order. Ruth, her mother, appeared in the bedroom doorway, her face worried. Honey, just like that, all of a sudden? I've already given too much time to what hurts me, Mom. Hazel zipped the bag shut. I'm not going to stay here with a front row seat to the life that could have been mine. If I stay, I lose myself. And it took me too long to build myself. Hank appeared behind his wife and didn't say anything, because he saw in his daughter's eyes that it wasn't running away. It was her saving herself. He stepped out for a moment and came back with the keys to the old truck in his hand, the same one she'd been driving since she got there. Take mine, sweetheart. He closed her hand around the keys. There's plenty of them here at the ranch. You're not leaving on a bus in the middle of the night like somebody with nowhere to go. You have somewhere. You always did. Promise me something. Hazel took both of their hands. If anybody asks about me, you don't say anything. Not where I am, not where I went. I need to start over clean, and that only works if I go whole. Her parents nodded, their respect stronger than the ache of letting her go. Before dawn, before the sun came up, her father's truck rolled down the dirt road out of Coldwater. She drove past the road where a black pickup had covered her in mud weeks before, past the entrance to the ranch where her father had given his life, past the town she loved, and that now hurt too much to stay in. In the rearview mirror, the mountains got smaller and smaller. She didn't cry until she crossed the county line, and then she cried the whole way. Behind her, in Coldwater, the pack was starting to hang lights for a party to celebrate an heir. Camille was smiling, certain she'd won. Rhett was sleeping badly, trapped in a lie he didn't even know was a lie. And nobody knew yet that the truth already had a date set to blow up. The city took Hazel in the way a city takes anybody in, without noticing she'd arrived. She went back to the firm the following Monday and buried herself in work, like a woman burying herself, so she wouldn't think. She took the hardest project on the board, a building 2 engineers had walked away from half-finished, and she didn't walk away. She got there before everybody. She left after. She filled the day right up to the last hour, on purpose, because it was in the gaps that he came back. And he always came back. He came back in the smell of wet dirt after the rain in the city, so different from the dirt in Coldwater, and still close enough to hurt. He came back in a black pickup she saw stopped at a light that made her heart take off, before reason could tell her it wasn't him, that it was never going to be him, that she herself had made sure it wouldn't be. He came back every night, when the noise of the city died down, and she sat by the window with a tea that went cold without her drinking it. That first week, she picked up the phone about 10 times to call home. About 10 times she hung up before it rang, because she knew that if her mother answered, and her voice came out softer than it should, she'd ask. And if she asked, she'd hear. And if she heard his name, she'd want to know the rest, and the rest would drag her back to a place it had taken everything she had to leave. So she didn't call. She made the tea. She looked at the lit-up city, and she repeated the same 3 things to herself, quietly, every night, until she almost believed them, that it would pass. That dignity was worth more than missing somebody. That it was better to be alone and whole than with somebody and only half. She had no idea at all that in that same week, more than 1,000 miles away, the lie that had driven her out of her own town was starting to crack. Rhett was the one who stopped drinking first, and this time it was a decision, not instinct. He hadn't forgotten the beta who scented the entire bedroom and found nothing. If the poison wasn't in the air, in the pillow, in the curtains, there was only one place left that nobody had thought to smell. The glass Camille filled with her own hands, every night. He didn't accuse her. He didn't ask. He just stopped drinking, 3 nights in a row. Quietly, always with an excuse ready. And without the wine, something in him started coming back. His head cleared an inch. Sounds got sharper. The coffee in the kitchen, the leather on the porch, the wet dirt outside, all of it came into him with a finer edge, the way the world comes into a whole wolf. And with the fog thinner, what was underneath it became unbearable. The party was set up in the big garden at the ranch. The whole pack had come, and the council elders on top of that, and some allies from the north, all of them disguised as guests of a rich country family celebrating a baby. Blue and pink balloons tied to the trees, a long table of food, the big decorated box in the center that, opened, would let the color loose in the air. Camille moved among the guests in a pale dress, her hand always on the belly that barely showed, glowing, taking the congratulations like a woman taking a crown. Rhett was beside her because he had to be, present and hollow, and for the first time in weeks, with his senses open. That was when he started to feel it. In the middle of the crowd, the heat, Camille's nerves, something in her scent wavered. That bitter veil of herbs he'd been smelling for weeks and had never been able to name started to thin, to crack, like perfume drying in the sun. And under it, rising slowly, came the scent of what she was carrying, the scent of the pup. And Rhett's wolf, awake now, clean now, stood straight up and growled a truth that went through his chest like ice. That scent wasn't his, and Alpha knows his own blood. He had heard Della say it, had repeated it to himself 1,000 times without being able to feel anything because of the fog. Now, without the fog, instinct said it without leaving room for doubt. The child Camille was carrying didn't have a drop of his blood in it. It never had. He turned his face toward her slowly, the blood draining out of his own face. Camille. The countdown, everybody, she called loudly, too cheerful, her voice shrill, pulling his hand toward the box. Come on, baby. 3, 2... That's nice, Camille. The voice came from the garden gate, loud, cutting through the party like a rock through glass. Nice, celebrating a baby that isn't the right man's. Everybody turned. A man was crossing the lawn toward the couple, plain clothes, his face marked with anger and with pain. Rhett didn't know him, but his wolf knew him instantly, because that man's scent was the same one rising off Camille's belly. The pup's blood. Who are you? Rhett asked, though he already knew. I'm Derek." The man stopped a few steps away, his eyes on Camille, who had gone waxy white. "And I'm that boy's father. She was sleeping with me on the side for months, got pregnant, and when she saw a rich alpha and a dream wedding in front of her, she vanished. She lied, and she turned my son into another man's heir." He looked at Rhett, and the anger gave way to something like pity. "She's been drugging you, Alpha. Every day, drop by drop." Refined wolfsbane. The wolf killer, but not the kind that kills, the kind that blinds. A renegade healer up north takes years to distill that and charges the price of a house for one bottle because it's the only thing in the world that makes a wolf deaf on the inside without putting him on the ground. That's what she's been putting in your drink since the night of the engagement, so you wouldn't catch the scent that the baby isn't yours and wouldn't fight the wedding. And she laid a veil over the boy's scent on top of it. Use that nose of yours now, if the fog lets you. Scent her, scent the boy, and tell me I'm lying. The whole garden went silent. The elders, the guests, the pack in disguise, nobody was breathing. Rhett didn't need to scent anything. He already knew. But he did anyway, and the wolf confirmed what the ice in his chest had already told him. "That's a lie." Camille found her voice shrill, desperate. "He's insane. He's obsessed. Rhett, you're not going to believe some... Della." Rhett didn't even raise his voice. The old housekeeper stepped forward, calm, and took a small amber bottle out of her apron pocket, half empty. "I found this in her purse last week, sir." Della looked at Camille without a drop of fear. Refined wolfsbane. The wolf killer that doesn't kill. The one that blinds. "I could smell a thread of it in your glass every night. Too faint for a dulled nose to catch. Strong enough to keep you in the dark. I was going to tell you. The truth saved me the trouble." Camille's mask came off for good. That beautiful face twisted, and what was left of it had nothing sweet in it. "I just wanted a good life for my son," she screamed, and now the tears were rage, not emotion. "You were never going to give me anything, Derek. You're nobody. I was going to give him a name, a throne, a lie." Rhett spoke quietly, and his quiet silenced that garden more than any shout could. He took a step toward her, and Camille backed up, because for the first time she saw the alpha under the man in her fiancé's face. "You drugged me, in my own house. You clouded my head. You trapped me in a night I don't even remember whether it happened, and you made me believe I was going to be a father so you could hold on to a marriage that nobody, not me, not you, not the moon goddess herself, was ever going to bless." His voice shook with held-back fury. "And you did worse. You drove away the only person who was good for me. She left thinking I chose you, and I let her, because of you. Rhett, get your things." He pointed at the gate, his hand steady, his eyes flashing gold in front of everybody who knew what that meant. "Get off my land. You never set foot here again. And be grateful I'm a better man than you deserve, because what I want to do isn't this." Camille looked around, hunting for a friendly face. One of the elders who had backed her. Anybody. She didn't find one. The ones who had brought her down from the north were looking away now, ashamed of having bet on her. She gathered up what pride she had left, lifted her chin, and started out. But at the garden gate she turned one last time, and the poison came back into her voice. "You think you won something?" she said. "She's already gone, Rhett. Long gone. And you did that all by yourself." Derek walked past her without touching her, his eyes hard. "I take care of what's mine, on my own, without lying." He looked at Rhett, a short nod from one man to another. "Sorry you found out this way. But you deserved to know." And he left, going after the woman carrying his child, leaving the garden in ruins of balloons and silence. Rhett stayed alone in the garden after everyone had gone. The blue smoke nobody ever let loose, still shut inside the decorated box. Free. For the first time in months. Free. No fiancé, no lie, no fog, no air that wasn't his. The wolf inside him took a deep breath for the first time in a long while, and it didn't help at all. Because the woman he wanted had already crossed the county line, believing he was the worst kind of man. He went after her the next morning anyway, the site empty, the Dunn house with its door shut, Hank saying without anger, the thing that was worse than anger. She asked us not to say, and we're going to respect our daughter. The door closed politely, finally. She hadn't left an address. She hadn't left a phone number. He didn't even have the right to go looking after everything he'd let her swallow. He looked at the box of balloons, at the empty garden, at the dark mountains in the distance. "I'm going to find you," he said quietly, to nobody, to the wind, to a scent that wasn't even in the air anymore. "Even if I have to turn this land inside out, I'm going to find you, Hazel." Far off, up in the mountains, his wolf howled for the first time in years, whole, clean, starving, and the howl rolled down the valley after a trail that had already gone cold. More than 1,000 miles away, Hazel woke in the middle of the night without knowing why, her heart pounding, the city humming down below. And for a second, before reason woke up with her, she was certain she had heard, far away, in a place that didn't exist on that map, the sound of water running between rocks. She rolled over in bed, pulled up the blanket and sent it away. A dream, she told herself. Just a dream. And she had no idea how wrong she was. Almost 6 months later, nobody in the city would have said Hazel Dunn had come out of a little cattle town in the middle of the mountains. She turned the pain into work. It was the closest thing to healing she could find, getting there before the sun, leaving after it, going so deep into the job that there was no room left to think. And it worked. The way work works. It didn't take the missing away, but it gave shape to what was left of her. In 6 months, she took over the most complicated project at the firm, a building 3 engineers had given up on, and she turned it around. Her name started circulating. She was invited to speak at a conference. A competitor tried to hire her for double the salary, and she turned it down, not out of loyalty, out of the pleasure of being able to turn it down. Without meaning to, she became the woman she'd always told her parents she was going to be. Steady. Respected. Owner of her own name. And at night, when the apartment got too quiet, she still heard the sound of a river that didn't exist in that city. And she held it in her chest, and didn't let anybody see it. She didn't go back to Coldwater. She didn't ask about anybody there. When her parents called and the conversation got close to a certain name, she steered away with the delicacy of a woman steering around a hole in the road. What was behind her stayed behind her. She had rebuilt herself brick by brick, and she wasn't going to let anybody put a finger on the new wall. That was why she didn't see it coming. More than 1,000 miles away, the Alpha wasn't doing any better. The pack could see it. A king who ate without hunger, slept without rest, handled the business of the land with the same competence as always, and a new emptiness behind his eyes. The wolf inside Rhett had gone quiet in a bad way, the silence of an animal that lost the trail and won't accept losing it. At night he went up alone to the creek in the woods, sat for hours at the edge of that still pool, and came back with nothing, because the scent had gone a long time ago. Della watched him long enough to say, one night, with no ceremony, "You're going to rot here waiting on a miracle. An Alpha doesn't get better alone, Mr. Rhett. Go after her." She didn't leave an address. Her parents won't talk. And I'm not going to stand there knocking on the Dunn's door like a beggar she has every right not to want. Then don't go as a beggar. The old woman picked up the dishes, calm. You're the most powerful man in this county. Act like one." Rhett sat looking at her for a while, and something in his chest, which for months had only known how to hurt, hardened back into a decision. He wasn't a man without resources. He had money, he had reach, he had contacts who owed him favors in 3 states. He didn't need to beg anybody. He only needed to want it hard enough. It took 2 weeks. The name of a firm in the city, a young engineer who had turned around a building nobody could move, a photo in an article about a conference, her hair tied back, the same stubbornness in her chin, more beautiful and harder than the last time he'd watched her go up the trail from the creek without looking back. Found you. And then he didn't do the obvious thing. He didn't catch a flight, didn't show up at her office to be thrown out in front of everybody. He did what an alpha does. He set the ground so she'd come to him. He called the firm. He hired her company to build a mansion up in the highlands of the ranch. A big project, expensive, the kind no firm turns down. And in the clause that mattered, he made one single demand, with the weight of a man who pays enough to demand. The job would be run by the engineer who knew that ground better than anybody. Hazel Dunn. She found out in a Monday morning meeting, when the head of the firm set the new contract folder on the table and smiled like a man handing over a gift. Dream project, Hazel. A mansion from the ground up, open budget, a client who insists on you. He slid the folder over. On the Wilder land, out in your part of the country. Mr. Rhett Wilder asked for you by name. The world stopped for a second, in exactly the way she'd sworn she'd never let it stop again. She opened the folder. She saw the name. She saw the map of the highlands she knew with her eyes closed. And she understood right then, with an anger that came up hot along her neck, exactly what this was. He had used the firm to drag her back. She wanted to say no. She almost did. But the firm was hers too now. The contract was too big to turn down without an explanation. And she hated admitting it. There was a part of her, small and stubborn, that needed to look him in the face one last time, from the top of everything she had built alone, and show him she'd survived. She came back to Coldwater on a late summer afternoon, 6 months after swearing she never would. He was waiting for her on the porch of the big house, and the first thing she felt was anger at her own heart, which took off before she gave it permission. If you think dragging me back here by force is going to... She doesn't exist anymore, Hazel. That stopped her in the middle of the sentence. Camille. Rhett came down the steps slowly, and she saw that he was thinner, worn, with the hollow eyes of a man who hadn't slept well in a long time. There's no fiancé. There's no baby. There never was. The baby was another man's. She lied, she drugged me, every day, with something that dulled my head so I wouldn't notice. And she fooled everybody to hold on to a marriage only she wanted. The truth blew up in front of the whole town at a gender reveal months ago. I threw her out that day, and I went after you the next morning. You were already gone. Hazel stood still, the ground slowly disappearing under her feet. You're lying. You know me. He stopped a few steps away, not crowding her. I'm a lot of bad things, but lying to you was never one of them. What hurt you was what I hid, never what I said. She wanted not to believe him. It would have been easier not to believe him. But his eyes were telling the truth, and she hated that her body recognized the truth before her head did. That doesn't change anything, she said, her voice steady, even with the ground shaking. I came to run a job. That's the only thing that's going to happen here. I build your house, I get paid, and I go back to my life. Don't drag me into anything again, Rhett. All right. He nodded, and didn't argue, and it was exactly that which disarmed her. Just the job. But I'm here, and this time I'm not going anywhere. He kept his word, and in the worst possible way for her, the patient way. He didn't rush anything. He didn't crowd her. He showed up at the mansion site with 2 coffees and left one beside her without saying it was for her. He left folded notes on top of the drawings when she went out for lunch, short things she swore she was going to throw away and kept in a drawer, one by one. One afternoon, she tripped over a root and he caught her by the waist before she went down and smiled and said, "If you wanted to fall into my arms, all you had to do was ask." And she laughed before she could stop herself, and hated that she'd laughed. The ice was giving. Slowly, against her will, an inch at a time. Because he wasn't the man she'd met anymore. There was a new calm to him, a patience, a respect that hadn't existed before. As if he knew now that wanting wasn't enough. You had to deserve it. But there was still one thing, that corner of her mind where she kept what didn't add up. The impossible strength in the well. The gold in his eyes at the bottom of that hole. The shape too big in the pasture at night. Things the anger had smothered, and that now, with the ice melting, were making noise again. It was the job that took her back to what had been left unsettled. While she was setting the stakes for the mansion up in the Highlands, Hazel did what that first summer never let her do. She went up alone, with a tape measure and her stubbornness, and read the whole site the way only she read it. She found the old stone well again, and this time she found the rest. Foundations covered in brush, deep pits dug into the hillside, too wide for any animal's burrow. Trails beaten into the ground by generations of heavy paws, going out and coming back from places that weren't on any map. An engineer reads history in the ground the way other people read it in a book, and the ground of that land was telling a story that didn't add up with cattle or with ranching. Something had been living up there long before the Wilders set the first fence post and made a point of not being seen. She came down with the photos on her phone and went straight to him. "What is up in your Highlands, Rhett?" She put the phone in front of him, the pictures of the pits, the trails, the stone well. "And don't come at me with cattle. No cow digs that. I've suspected since day one. Now I've got the proof in the ground. I want the truth." He looked at the photos for a long time. Then he looked at her, at the stubbornness in her chin, at the woman who had found on her own, with a tape measure, what the whole pack had spent generations burying, and something in him gave. "Come with me tonight, to your creek." His voice came out low. "You can't tell somebody a thing like this. You have to see it." The moon was full over the mountains when they got there, filling the pool with light. He was looking at the dark water. "There's something you need to know before you decide anything about me. The last thing I hid. After this one, there's no secret left between us." He turned to her. "But I need you not to run." Her heart tightened. "Rhett, you're scaring me." "I know." His voice came out low, almost a request. "Just don't run." And then he took a step back, into the full light of the moon, and Hazel watched her world split down the middle. It started with his eyes. The green went dark, gave way, and in its place rose that gold she had seen once at the bottom of a well and spent months telling herself was a reflection. It wasn't a reflection. It was this. The air around him went heavy, electric, and she heard, felt, a deep sound of bone and earth that had nothing human in it, and his body changed. It wasn't fast. It wasn't monstrous the way it is in the movies. It was enormous. His back curved, grew, his shirt tore like paper, and where the man had been something else came up, huge, dark, covered in black fur that the moonlight made shine like water at night. His shoulders came up to the height of a horse. His hands turned into paws that sank into the dirt of the bank. And when he finally raised his head, what looked back at Hazel from the other side of the creek was a wolf the size of a dream, immense, magnificent, with 2 gold eyes she knew better than she wanted to admit. Hazel didn't run. She should have run. Every cell in her body was screaming at her to run, but she stayed, rooted where she was, her heart pounding so hard she was sure the whole thing was echoing through the woods, and she looked into those gold eyes, and the eyes were his. They were Rhett, the same thing that had looked at her at the bottom of the well, in the office, on that mud-covered road. The same soul, in a body that shouldn't exist. The dens, she said suddenly, the piece falling into place. The foundations, the trails, the stone well that swallowed me back at the beginning. They weren't ruins. They were yours. Dens. A whole place built for the pack, hidden under this town's nose for generations. She let out a disbelieving laugh. I found your secret with a tape measure, Rhett, and I spent months thinking I was losing my mind. She still didn't know it. The wolf had no way of answering from inside that body, but she had put together on her own what nobody from the outside had put together in 100 years. The wolf lowered that enormous head. He took a step toward her, slow, careful, and stopped. He offered her the distance. He left the choice with her, the way he always had. And it was that, not the size, not the impossibility, not the fear. It was that giant animal's care in stopping so he wouldn't frighten her that finally made her legs move. Hazel crossed the last few steps, her hand shaking, and laid her palm against the side of that huge head. The fur was warm, alive, real. It's you, she whispered, and it wasn't a question. This whole time, it was you. The wolf closed his gold eyes under her hand. And then, with the same deep sound of earth and bone, all of it came undone again, and it was Rhett kneeling on the bank of the creek, human, breathing hard, his eyes going back to green, looking up at her like she was the only solid thing in a world that had just turned inside out. It's me, he said. It always was. She dropped to her knees in front of him, in the wet dirt, unable to let go of his face. Everything in me knew it was you from the first second, he said, his voice rough, his hands coming up to cover hers on his face. I spent all this time not understanding why my head only cleared when I was near you. It was my wolf, Hazel. He recognized you on that road, covered in mud, throwing a rock at my truck, and he never let go of you again, not when you left, not for one day. Hazel looked at him, the man she had hated, wanted, lost, and cried over, kneeling in front of her now with not one lie left between them, the full moon filling her creek with light, and felt the last brick of the armor it had taken her 6 months to build come loose from the wall. I should be terrified of you right now, she said, her voice failing. Are you? She shook her head slowly, her eyes full. No. A wet laugh escaped her, and that scares me a whole lot more. He brought his hand to her face, his thumb wiping away the tear that fell, and the distance between them, that distance that had separated them since a dirt road almost a year ago, finally got too small to exist. He kissed her, and this time there was no well, no hurry, nothing waiting to get in the way. There was only the moon, the running water, and the two of them finally on the same side. There were things you didn't learn in one night, and Hazel had a whole world to learn. In the weeks that followed, she split her life in two. By day, she was the engineer building the mansion up in the Highlands, giving orders, solving problems, her own woman the way she always had been. By night, she learned a world that had existed her whole life right under her nose, the pack, the rules, the scent, the wolf. Della welcomed her into the kitchen of the big house like a woman who had always known she'd end up there. Walt, who had been a wolf since before she was born, laughed at her when she asked too many questions. But there was one conversation that wasn't light. If we seal this our way, Rhett said one night, his fingers laced through hers, there's no going back. The claiming is the bite on the neck. It ties us together forever, in a way not even death undoes. But it also changes you, Hazel. My blood wakes the wolf that sleeps in every human woman in Alpha Marks, you won't just be mine. You'll become one of us. You'll get the wolf, and you'll lose the all-human life you've always known." She sat quiet for a while, looking at the fire. "And if I don't want the bite, then we stay like this." He brought her hand to his lips. "At my side, with no seal on it, and I love you exactly the same until my last day. The choice is yours. It always was. I'll never take that from you." And it was precisely because he said that, because he left the door open, because he demanded nothing, that she knew her answer. "I didn't spend 6 months rebuilding myself to live in halves," she said, turning to him. "If it's going to be, it's going to be whole. I want the wolf. I want the bond. I want you, in whatever way lets me have more of you." She smiled, her eyes wet. "And before you have an attack of nobility, I'm still an engineer, Luna and all. But this mansion is going to have my name on the drawings, and so is the pack's next job." He laughed and pulled her to him, and kissed her like a man sealing a deal much better than any contract. The rest of that night belonged only to the two of them, his mouth on her neck, their hands learning the way, the world shrinking until it fit inside a room that still smelled like new wood. He took her slowly this time, with nothing waiting to interrupt, and when the last of their good sense went out, she was the one who pulled him closer and didn't leave any space between them at all. The council turned up its nose, of course. "A human Luna," the elders grumbled, "an engineer from the city. No blood, no bloodline." But those same elders had bet on a she-wolf from a strong line who drugged her own alpha and nearly put a false heir on the throne, and that lesson still stung. And when an alpha stands up in the middle of his own pack and says he has chosen, and the bond between him and the woman is so plain it makes the air shake, there isn't much a council of old men can do besides bow their heads. They set it for the full moon of the choosing season. On the porch of the house, the two of them built together. She came down the stairs of the new mansion in a white dress, and there was no jewelry, no veil, nothing but her, and it was enough. The whole pack was gathered on the lawn under the full moon, and up on the porch Rhett was waiting for her in a pale shirt open at the collar, his eyes already gold with held-back feeling. When she got close, he did the thing the pack had never seen their alpha do for anyone. He knelt. The most powerful man in that county, on his knees in front of an engineer who once buried him in insults in the middle of a muddy road. "I'm not asking you to fix what already happened," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm asking you to live what we haven't lived yet. You taught me that loving takes courage. That building hurts and is worth it. I don't just want you to finish this house, Hazel. I want you to finish all of my days with me." He lifted his eyes to her. "Will you be mine? My mate? My Luna? My wife?" "I will." Her voice didn't even shake. "It was always you, you rude man with the pickup truck. Since the very first rock." The pack laughed and cried and howled at the sky. And the moon goddess looked down the way she looks at the pairs she tied together herself before they were ever born.